So this is going to be a problem of how we produce good food. The challenge is that currently we are eating wrong food, a lot of staples, a lot of food that is filled with calories and sugars. So that is limiting our potential, especially the potential of the kids that will be the future leaders of our country. So WWF is trying to call on all the stakeholders to think about how do we transform the food system to make sure that it works for us and it gives us the future that we want.
But essentially, what do we need to do? How are the stakeholders going to be involved? How do these stakeholders engage with the ordinary public at home to be able to show them the importance of exactly this?
So what we do in the Living Planet Conference is our platform where we bring all the stakeholders to discuss what are the options that we have as a country. So what we did this year was we invited economists like Wanile Sihlobo and other important people that bring their minds together to come up with solutions. Part of those were academics that are researching on how to improve the food system to make sure that it doesn't damage the environment, but also it takes care of our people for now and for the future. So some of the deliberations that took place there, we have taken them forward as actions. So we had also additional side events where we brought stakeholders to think about how to take these actions forward together in the form of initiatives.
In terms of South Africans per se, you know, we're a water scarce country. How do we take this further? How do we change the mindset? How do we grow this culture to be able to make this something that is sustainable 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the line?
So Chantel, that's a very important question. So South Africa is a very water scarce country, and the problem is that currently our agriculture requires about 70% of the fresh water resources that are available, and that is not sustainable. So that means then with regards to water, we need to be very mindful of how we use water. In the agricultural sector, we need to start rethinking the use of bulk water where there is possible wastage. We need to look at new technologies that are available now in South Africa that could help us save this important natural resource. But also it doesn't only end with water. Our food system uses a lot of chemicals, and these chemicals, they come up in our food, in our fruit, in our veggies, and in our meat. And they cause health problems. And they also pollute our freshwater resources. So we've got an increasing environmental problem. So all these factors, they contribute to the climate change, which means that our system will not be able to produce the food at the required level for the increasing and bulging population.
In terms of the technologies that you've spoken about and the infrastructure, is it something that South Africa currently has? And if we don't, how do we put it in place that, number one, it's feasible, and number two, it is sustainable? So South Africa has got a very good potential of using the available technologies. In fact, South Africa can produce some of these technologies. So what is required is the meeting of the minds between all the stakeholders, government, academia, business, and ordinary people on the ground and civil society. And this is what WWF is trying to do. We're trying to get every stakeholder to converge around this common problem. The future depends on how we embrace the concept of sustainable intensification, which means we produce within our limits. So that is the important precept of changing the food system. So WWF proposes 5 approaches that when we looking at agriculture, we must be regenerative about it, and also our fisheries as well, we need to be regenerative, but also we need to be wise about how we use water, but also our supply chains and markets, they need to support those producers that have already committed to the sustainable production practices. But also there's a problem of food waste that we have.
We know that 33% of our food is wasted, and we need to address that. And the last one is this dietary shift that you've mentioned at the beginning of the interview.
In terms of the dietary shift as well as food, let's then talk about the nutrition challenges that we see. Mr. Silandela, can you hear me?
Lost the voice. I can hear you now, yes.
All right, let's just discuss the three biggest nutrition challenges that were actually highlighted in this week's conference.
So the challenge of nutrition is because our system promotes a lot of monoculture, and so we do not have varied diets, and this becomes not only an environmental problem, but it translates into a health problem. So therefore we eat foods that have high calories, whereas we need it to balance our food, our diets. So what we are calling upon is we need to have a rethink about our food system so that we can have varied diets that support our health. The challenges are very multidimensional. For example, in the Western Cape just last year, 5 out of every 10 deaths have been as a result of nutrition and other related diseases, and that is not sustainable. As I've said, if we are looking at raising youth and kids that can be leaders in the future, they will not be able to reach their full potential, and they will not be able to run our country the way that we would love them to.
Now, earlier on you spoke about the importance of the role players and the stakeholders in this. How essentially can these challenges become, or rather how essentially can we overcome these challenges with the participation of the relevant role players as well as food producers that actually play in this process?
So it is a challenge because there are many stakeholders that are involved, but also there are vested interests from all sides. You've got businesses that are looking at making profit, but you've got also government that have got their own priorities, but you've got civil society that also need to fulfill their dreams. So it is a challenge because there are many people that are involved, and it makes it even more complex. But WWF has experience in bringing our stakeholders around the table to talk about complex problems such as the food system, and this is what the Living Planet Conference was focusing on. So we brought all these stakeholders so that we can churn out a way forward and isolate the problems that prevent us from talking and getting into solutions.
We thank you very much for joining us this evening. That was WWF Head of Sustainable Agriculture, Mkhululi Silandela, just taking us through the focus of the Worldwide Fund for the Nature's 2019 Planet Conference. Of course, it took place this week in Pretoria.